The world as it stands in this epoch is a monument to the absolute power of thermodynamics, a realm where heat is the rarest currency and the cold is an encroaching sentient force. We are millions of years in the past, standing at the precipice of the Pleistocene, a time when the Earth's axis tilted away from the warmth, plunging the northern hemisphere into a slumber of ice. The lush verdant canopies that once swaddled the continents have withered and retreated, replaced by an endless blinding expanse of white that stretches from the pole to the mid-latitudes. The atmosphere is thin and aggressively dry, stripped of its moisture by the freezing temperatures, creating a sky that is a pale, washed-out blue indifferent to the struggles taking place beneath it. This is not merely a season. It is an era, a geological sentence passed down upon every living organism, demanding adaptation or promising extinction. The wind here is a constant physical presence, a relentless sculptor that carves the landscape into jagged ridges and smooth, deceptive plains of hard-packed snow. It howls across the tundra with a voice that drowns out all other sounds, carrying with it millions of microscopic ice crystals that act like sandpaper against exposed flesh. There is no shelter on this open steppe, no caves to hide in, no trees to break the gale. There is only the vast horizontal geometry of the ice sheet. The ground itself is locked in permafrost, a layer of soil frozen as hard as granite, impenetrable to roots and burrowing creatures alike, forcing life to exist entirely on the surface, exposed and vulnerable. In this white silence, the only measure of time is the slow, agonizing movement of the glaciers grinding mountains into dust over centuries. Against this overwhelming backdrop of white, a small, dark anomaly breaks the continuity of the horizon, moving with a desperate rhythmic persistence. It is a line of figures, upright and bipedal, silhouetted against the blinding glare of the sun, reflecting off the ice. These are the wandering kin, the ancestors of modern humanity, fragile biological machines, pushing the limits of their endurance. They are not the masters of this world. They are intruders in a kingdom of ice refugees fleeing the dying forests of the south for the uncertain promise of the mammoth steppes. Their bodies are wrapped in crude, untreated furs, the skins of wolves and deer layered over their own, bound with sinew and hope, yet the cold finds every gap, biting into their skin with the sharpness of a flint knife. Each step these wanderers take is a calculation of energy expenditure versus distance gained, a biological equation that must remain positive for survival. Their breath plumes out in rhythmic bursts of steam, instantly crystallizing in the air, a visible testament to the heat their bodies are losing with every second. Beneath the layers of fur, their physiology is in overdrive. Hearts pump thick, nutrient-rich blood to the extremities, fighting the constriction of capillaries while muscles shiver involuntarily to generate warmth. They are lean, hardened by a lifetime of movement, their bones dense and thick, built to withstand the immense physical stress of a nomadic existence. This is not a march of conquest. It is a migration of necessity, driven by the primal urge to find food in a landscape that offers nothing but frozen solitude. At the center of the column, protected by the strongest bodies, travels the most precious possession of the tribe, the fire. It is not carried as a torch which would be extinguished in seconds by the gale, but smoldering within a hollowed-out birch log wrapped in damp moss and dry fungi. The fire-bearer, a position of supreme importance and burden, clutches the embers against his chest, shielding them with his own body, sacrificing his warmth to keep the spark alive. If the fire dies, the tribe dies. It is their only defense against the crushing temperatures of the night and the prowling shadows of the megafauna. The smoke from the carrier trails behind them, a thin grey ribbon that marks their passage, the only sign of industry in a world governed by raw nature. The terrain they traverse is treacherous, a deceptive mosaic of solid ice and fragile snow bridges concealing deep, jagged crevasses. These fissures are the mouths of the glacier deep blue abysses that drop hundreds of feet into the crushing dark of the ice shelf's interior. The leader of the group, a scarred male with eyes narrowed to slits against the glare, probes the ground ahead with a long polished spear shaft. He reads the surface like a map, looking for the subtle changes in texture and color that indicate a hollow beneath. Every muscle in his body is tense, ready to recoil, for he knows that one misstep means vanishing into the geological record to be entombed in ice for 1,000,000 years. The silence of the group is absolute. Communication is reduced to hand signals, and guttural clicks sound conserved just as carefully as body heat. As the day wears on, the pale sun begins its low arc toward the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows that stretch out behind the walkers like ghosts. The temperature, already lethal, begins to plummet further, the air growing so cold that it hurts to inhale, freezing the moisture inside the nostrils. The wind picks up, shifting from a steady gale to gusting violence, whipping up the loose snow into a blinding ground blizzard. Visibility drops to less than an arm's length. The world dissolves into a swirling white void where up and down lose their meaning. The tribe instinctively tightens their formation, moving closer until they are physically touching a single organism, sharing its collective warmth against the assault of the atmosphere. It is in this blinding chaos that the environment demands its toll, a tax of life paid to the ice. A straggler, an elder whose joints have been ground down by decades of migration, falters for a fraction of a second, her foot snagging on a ridge of concealed ice. The rhythm of the march is broken. She falls, not with a scream, but with a heavy, muffled thud, instantly swallowed by the swirling snow. The line stops, the connection severed. A younger male turns back his hand, reaching out into the whiteness, grasping for a limb, a fur, anything solid. But the wind is a wall, and the snow fills the space where she stood, within seconds, erasing her silhouette as if she never existed. There is no time for mourning, no pause for ceremony. To stop now in this storm would mean death for the entire group. The leader barks a sharp, guttural command, barely audible over the roar of the wind, ordering the line to press forward. They turn their backs on the fallen, the biological imperative of the many overriding the sorrow for the one. This is the ruthlessness of the Pleistocene. It does not negotiate, and it does not forgive weakness or accident. The elder is left behind, her body rapidly cooling, soon to be covered by layers of sediment and ice, beginning the slow process of fossilization. In a million years, her bones might be found a fragmented puzzle for a future species to ponder, but in this moment she is simply biomass returning to the freeze. The tribe moves on, their heads bowed against the gale, the gap in their line closed up, the warmth of the group resealed. They reach the edge of the ice shelf as the twilight deepens into the bruised purple of a polar night. Ahead of them lies the Bridge of Winds, a narrow, spine-like ridge connecting the high glacier to the lower tundra valleys where the great herds are rumored to be. The bridge is a nightmare of physics, buffeted by updrafts that can lift a grown man off his feet, slippery with rime ice, and flanked by sheer drops on either side. It is the bottleneck of their journey, the final trial before they can descend to the hunting grounds. The wind here screams like a living thing, a sonic assault that rattles the teeth in their skulls. The fire-bearer moves to the center, shielded by 3 others, while the leader takes the first step onto the ridge, digging his heels into the ice to anchor the chain. The crossing is a slow, agonizing ballet of balance and terror. They move inch by inch, keeping their center of gravity low, using their spears as desperate anchors against the lateral force of the wind. Below them, the clouds swirl in a dark, churning ocean, obscuring the valley floor miles beneath. The cold here is absolute, stripping away the sensation in their fingers and toes, turning extremities into numb, dead weight. One slip, one gust of wind catching a loose flap of hide, and they will be swept into the void. The sound of the wind is so loud it becomes a silence of its own, a white noise that erases thought, leaving only the lizard brain instinct to cling to the rock and ice. Halfway across, the wind shifts, slamming into them from the side with the force of a physical blow. The group staggers the line, buckling like a broken snake. The fire-bearer slips his knees, hitting the ice with a crack, the precious embers spilling dangerously close to the edge of the log. For a heartbeat, time suspends. A female next to him throws her body weight against him, pinning him to the ridge, taking the full brunt of the freezing gale on her exposed face to prevent him from sliding off. They hold there a sculpture of desperation, frozen against the twilight muscles, trembling eyes locked in a primal communication of fear and resolve. Slowly, agonizingly, they regain their footing, the embers secured the line, restabilized. They crawl the rest of the way, hands bleeding from gripping the jagged ice, until they collapse onto the solid, wider ground of the descending slope. They have survived the high ice, but they are exhausted, their energy reserves critically depleted. They descend into the relative shelter of a rocky outcrop as the true night takes hold. The sky above clears, revealing a canopy of stars so bright and numerous they seem to crush the earth with their cold light. The aurora borealis ignites ribbons of green and violet, dancing silently across the heavens, a cosmic display of indifference to the suffering below. The tribe huddles together in a tight circular mass, the fire-bearer, coaxing the embers into a small, smokeless flame, using dried dung and moss carried from the old lands. This tiny circle of orange light is the only thing that separates them from the encroaching void, a defiant beacon in a world of dark and cold. In the flickering light we see the faces of the survivors, weather-beaten, smeared with animal grease, eyes deep-set and haunted by the vastness of the landscape. They chew on strips of dried meat hard as wood, their jaws working methodically to extract every calorie. There is no conversation, only the sound of breathing and the crackle of the fire. They are the carriers of the genetic code that will one day build civilizations, but tonight they are simply animals trying to make it to sunrise. They check their feet for frostbite, repair the bindings on their spears, and tend to the minor wounds of the crossing. The memory of the fallen elder is already fading, replaced by the immediate crushing need to sleep and restore their strength. As they drift into a fitful shivering sleep, the snow begins to fall again, soft and heavy, covering their tracks on the ridge above. The geological record is being written in these layers, the footprint compressed into mud, the lost tool dropped in the snow, the body left behind on the ice. Every struggle, every death, every survival is a data point in the history of the planet, waiting to be locked in stone. The wind howls outside their small shelter, a reminder that the reprieve is temporary. Tomorrow they must descend into the Valley of the Giants. Tomorrow they must stop being refugees and become killers. The white silence has tested them and found them worthy of the next stage, but the true test of blood and bone awaits in the shadows of the tundra below. The descent from the glacial shelf is a journey not just across distance, but through geological time, moving from the sterile white silence of the Ice Age peak into the vibrant, dangerous biological density of the tundra valleys. As the tribe navigates the treacherous scree slopes the ground beneath their feet, changes composition, shifting from the unforgiving hardness of solid ice to the spongier, complex texture of the permafrost steppe. This is the domain of the mammoth steppe, a unique biome that will vanish from the earth in the millennia to come, but for now it is the most productive ecosystem on the planet. The air here, though still freezing, carries a weight and texture absent in the high altitudes. It is heavy with the scent of sage, dry grasses, and the unmistakable musk-laden odor of massive biological engines at work. The valley floor opens up before them like a vast golden ocean of dry grass dusted with snow and rippling under the relentless wind. This is not a barren wasteland. It is a Serengeti of the north, capable of supporting a biomass that defies the imagination of the modern world. Great herds of steppe bison, their dark coats absorbing the weak sunlight, move in river-like formations that stretch for miles, their hooves churning the soil and preventing the moss from taking over. Interspersed among them are bands of wild horses, small and stocky, their manes thick and upright, alert to the slightest movement in the brush. The sheer scale of life here is overwhelming, a chaotic thrumming engine of calories and protein that the tribe views with a mix of hunger and profound intimidation. But in this kingdom of giants, the humans are small, soft-skinned anomalies, possessing neither the crushing hooves of the herbivores nor the bone-shattering jaws of the apex predators. They move through the tall grass in a scattered, crouched formation, using the terrain to break up their silhouettes, acutely aware that they have entered the hunting grounds of monsters. The shadow of a cave lion, a predator 20% larger than its African cousins, looms over the psychological landscape of the tribe. They have seen these golden killers before, watching from the ridges, their eyes reflecting the campfire light with a terrifying predatory intelligence. Here, man is not the master. He is a potential meal, a slow-moving bag of protein to be snatched if he wanders too far from the safety of the spears. The leader pauses, raising a fist to halt the column, his eyes scanning a patch of disturbed earth near a frozen stream bed. This is the beginning of the hunt, a process that relies not on speed or strength, but on the cognitive superpower of the species' pattern recognition. He kneels his fingers, tracing the rim of a massive circular depression in the mud now frozen solid as rock. It is a footprint, but of such magnitude that a human child could curl up inside it and sleep. The ridges of the skin are preserved in the clay, a topographical map of a creature that weighs as much as the entire tribe combined. The track is fresh, the edges sharp, and uneroded by the wind, indicating that the maker passed here only hours ago. The hunters gather around the track, a silent council of war held over a mark in the mud. They communicate with subtle gestures pointing to the depth of the impression, which reveals the animal's immense weight, and the stride length, which suggests a slow grazing pace. This is the signature of the woolly mammoth, the architect of this ecosystem, the titan that knocks down trees to create the grasslands. To the tribe, this creature is more than an animal. It is a walking mountain of resources. Meat to last through the winter, fur to build a fortress against the wind, and bone to craft the tools of survival. But to hunt such a being is an act of supreme audacity, a challenge to the natural order that requires them to transcend their biological limitations. They leave the women, children, and the fire-bearer in the shelter of a limestone overhang, a natural fortress protected by a screen of thorny scrub. The separation is a calculated risk, a division of the tribe's strength to secure its future. The hunters, a group of 6 males and 2 females, strip away any unnecessary gear, carrying only their spears, flint knives, and small pouches of dried meat. They smear their bodies with a mixture of ash and animal fat, masking their human scent with the smells of the earth and the kill. They are no longer refugees. They are ghosts, moving silently through the grass, their eyes locked on the horizon where the tracks lead. The tracking process is a grueling exercise in focus, demanding a sensory awareness that has largely atrophied in their descendants. They read the landscape like a text. A snapped willow branch, oozing sap, indicates the height of the beast. A patch of crushed sage reveals where it lay down to rest. The flight patterns of ravens overhead signal the presence of a disturbance. They move downwind, constantly checking the direction of the breeze by tossing handfuls of dry grass into the air. If the herd smells them, the hunt is over before it begins. The mammoths will either stampede, vanishing into the vastness of the steppe, or worse, they will form a defensive wall of tusks and trample the intruders into the permafrost. As they crest a low ridge, the wind shifts, carrying a sound that vibrates in their chest cavities, a deep, resonant rumble that is felt as much as heard. It is infrasound, a low-frequency communication used by elephants to talk across miles, a sound of immense power and ancient melancholy. The hunters drop to their bellies, crawling the final yards through the snow and scrub until they can peer over the edge. Below them, in a wide bowl-shaped depression, sheltered from the worst of the wind, stands the herd. It is a sight that stops the breath. 20 distinct shapes, massive and dark, distinct against the snow, moving with a slow tectonic grace. Dominating the group is the matriarch, a colossal female whose tusks curve inward like the scythes of a giant crossing in front of her trunk. Her fur is a thick, matted tapestry of brown and black, hanging nearly to the ground, swaying with every step like a heavy curtain. She is a fortress of biology, her skin inches thick, her skull a honeycomb of bone designed to support the immense weight of her ivory. She pauses, her trunk raised like a periscope, testing the air, her small, intelligent eyes scanning the horizon. She has lived through 50 winters. She remembers the geography of the ice, the location of water, and the smell of the 2-legged predators. She is the library of the herd, and her vigilance is their shield. To the left of the matriarch stands a younger bull, massive but less cautious, tearing at a cluster of dwarf birch trees with violent enthusiasm. He is the target. The hunters identify him not by speaking but by a collective fixation of their gaze. He is isolated slightly from the protective circle of the females and calves, his aggression and hunger making him vulnerable. He is a mountain of muscle and fat, a prize that could sustain the tribe for months, but he is also a killing machine capable of tossing a tiger 30 feet into the air or crushing a wolf with a casual step. The hunters study him, memorizing his movements, looking for a limp, a scar, any sign of weakness. The environment around the herd is a zone of disturbed reality. The sheer mass of the animals creates a microclimate. Their body heat melts the snow where they stand, and their heavy breathing creates a localized fog that clings to their flanks. Parasitic birds flutter around them, picking insects from their fur, while Arctic foxes trail at a safe distance, waiting for the giants to unearth rodents from their burrows. It is a complete self-contained world, a moving ecosystem that the humans are plotting to disrupt. The contrast is stark. The fragile, shivering hunters, armed with sticks and stones, plotting to bring down a creature that embodies the absolute power of the Ice Age. The leader signals the beginning of the encirclement. They split into 2 teams, moving wide to flank the herd, using the undulating terrain to stay out of the matriarch's line of sight. This is the moment where human evolution shines, not in claws or fangs, but in the ability to coordinate complex action over time and space. They hold a mental map of the valley in their minds, anticipating where the herd will move, driving them not with force but with psychology. They need the bull to separate further, to be lured into the broken ground where his speed and mass will become a liability. The tension is excruciating. A single snapped twig, a sudden shift in the wind, and the element of surprise is lost. One of the younger hunters, crouching in a cluster of rocks, watches a massive, distinct shape detach itself from the group. It is the bull wandering toward a frozen creek bed, drawn by the scent of fresh vegetation exposed by the wind. The trap is setting itself. The hunter's heart hammers against his ribs, a frantic rhythm of adrenaline and fear. He grips his spear, a heavy shaft of spruce tipped with a bifacial flint point, a piece of stone napped to a razor edge designed to slice through thick hide and create a bleeding wound. This tool is the culmination of 1,000,000 years of technical innovation, the only thing that levels the playing field between the ape and the leviathan. Suddenly the matriarch stiffens. She stops chewing, her ears flaring out like sails, her trunk freezing in midair. The wind has betrayed them. A gust has swirled into the bowl, carrying the faint, unmistakable scent of processed leather smoke and human sweat. She releases a trumpet blast, a sound of shattering volume that echoes off the valley walls, a command that instantly mobilizes the herd. The calves are shoved into the center, the females forming a wall of fur and ivory around them. But the bull is too far out. He turns confused, his reaction time slowed by his isolation. This is the split second the hunters have been waiting for. The leader rises from the grass, a silhouette of defiance, and lets out a primal scream, waving his arms to draw the bull's attention. It is a suicidal gesture, designed to provoke. The bull sees him a tiny, insignificant irritant. The beast does not flee, he charges. The ground shakes with the impact of 6 tons of accelerating biological fury. The snow flies up in geysers around his feet, his tusks lowered to spear the human pest. This is not a hunt anymore. It is a confrontation. The leader stands his ground for a terrifying second, then breaks running toward the rocky terrain of the creek bed. He is the bait. The other hunters break cover, sprinting to cut off the bull's retreat to the herd. They scream, throw rocks, and wave furs, creating a chaotic sensory overload. They are herding the storm, guiding the charging mountain into the killing zone. The bull, blinded by rage and the sudden appearance of multiple threats, ignores the safety of the matriarch's call and pursues the leader. He crashes through the scrub, his momentum carrying him away from the open plain and into the trap. The shadow of the Titan falls over the humans, vast and terrifying, but they do not scatter. They tighten the noose. As the bull enters the uneven ground of the creek bed, his footing becomes unsure. The frozen mud is slippery, the rocks hidden by snow. He stumbles, his massive shoulder slamming into a limestone outcrop, shaking the earth. In that moment of hesitation, the hunters close in. They are no longer observers recording the majesty of nature. They are active agents of death. The air is filled with the roar of the beast and the sharp, rhythmic chants of the humans. The stage is set for the collision of flesh and stone. The fossil record waits to receive its due. The rocky creek bed, carved by millennia of glacial meltwater, now transforms into a chaotic arena of primal violence. The mammoth bull, a siege engine of muscle and bone, thrashes in the confined space, his massive hooves shattering the ice and turning the frozen mud into a slurry. He is trapped not by walls but by the treacherous footing that negates his primary advantage, momentum. The hunters, utilizing their bipedal agility, scramble up the limestone embankments, positioning themselves above the beast. They are no longer individual biological entities. They are a hive mind, a single predatory organism, acting with terrifying synchronization. The air is thick with the smell of musk, crushed pine, and the metallic tang of adrenaline, a chemical cocktail that heightens every sense, making time seem to slow down in the face of mortal danger. From the ridge above, the first hunter initiates the attack, launching a spear not with the arm alone but with the aid of a spear thrower, a wooden leverage device that acts as an extension of the limb. The projectile flies with the velocity of a modern arrow, whistling through the thin, cold air before burying itself deep into the bull's flank. The sound of the impact is a dull, wet thud, followed instantly by the snap of the wooden shaft as the animal muscles convulse. It is a wound that would cripple a wolf, but on this leviathan it is merely a sting. Yet it serves its purpose. The bull roars a deafening blast of pain and rage that shakes the snow from the nearby scrub and turns to face his attacker, exposing his neck to the hunters on the opposite bank. This is the strategy of the persistence hunt adapted for Titan's death by 1,000 cuts, a slow, agonizing erosion of the prey's vitality. More spears rain down, aiming for the soft tissue behind the ears, the trunk and the underbelly. The flint points snap to a molecular sharpness, slice through the thick, matted wool and tough skin, finding the blood vessels beneath. The snow beneath the bull begins to speckle with bright, arterial red, a shocking contrast to the monochrome world. The beast is confused. His evolutionary defense is to trample and crush, but his enemies are everywhere and nowhere, stinging from a distance, retreating before he can bring his tusks to bear. He is fighting a phantom, a swarm of stinging insects that possess the cunning of gods. Down in the creek bed, the engagement is far more perilous. 3 hunters, including the leader, dart in and out of the bull's blind spots, screaming and waving furs to keep the animal spinning. This is a dance on the edge of a razor. One slip on the icy rocks, one miscalculation of the bull's reach, and the penalty is instant annihilation. The bull swings his head, his 9-foot curved tusks slicing the air like scythes. The wind, generated by the swing alone, knocks one hunter off balance, sending him sprawling into the snow. The bull pivots, sensing the vulnerability, and rears up his front legs, lifting tons of weight into the air, preparing to bring them down in a crushing gravity hammer that will pulverize rock and bone alike. The physiological toll on the mammoth is mounting rapidly, a weapon the humans use as effectively as their spears. The beast is built for the extreme cold, his body a furnace designed to retain heat wrapped in layers of fat and fur. The frantic exertion of the fight creates a lethal internal temperature spike. He is overheating from the inside out, his breath coming in ragged, steaming gasps that fog the entire ravine. The humans, conversely, are the champions of thermoregulation. Their hairless skins sweat, cooling them efficiently, allowing them to sustain high-intensity activity long after the giant has begun to fade. They are running him to death without moving more than a few hundred yards, weaponizing his own biology against him. In a desperate bid to escape, the bull charges the embankment, his trunk lashing out to grab the tormentors above. A spearman, too slow to retreat, thrusts his weapon downward with both hands. The point strikes a rib, the force of the collision so great that the flint tip shatters, leaving a jagged fragment embedded deep in the bone. Millions of years later, this specific injury, a piece of stone fused into a fossilized rib, will tell the story of this day to a species that has forgotten the cold. But in this moment it merely enrages the beast. He shakes his massive head, snapping the spear shaft, and heaves his bulk up the slope, the earth crumbling beneath his weight. The leader, seeing the line break, makes a critical decision. He leaps from his position, landing in the creek bed, directly behind the climbing bull. He shouts a guttural challenge, piercing the din of the battle, creating a distraction to save the hunters on the ridge. The bull halts, sliding back down the scree, and turns his full, terrible attention to the lone figure standing in the mud. The leader holds his ground, a final spear braced against his hip point angled up. It is the classic confrontation of the epoch, the thinking ape against the raw force of nature. For a heartbeat, the two lock eyes, one ancient and small, the other massive and doomed, bound together by the impending violence. The charge is instantaneous and unstoppable. The leader thrusts his spear, aiming for the heart, but the sheer mass of the animal brushes the weapon aside like a twig. The bull's trunk wraps around the man's torso, lifting him effortlessly into the air. There is no scream, only the sickening crunch of ribs collapsing under the pressure. The beast slams the hunter into the limestone wall of the creek bed, a blow of such devastation that it leaves an indentation in the snow. The leader falls broken and lifeless, his body sliding down to rest among the rocks. He has paid the ultimate price for the tribe's survival, his body now destined to become part of the same geological layer as the beast he hunted. The death of their leader triggers a frenzy in the remaining hunters. The calculated discipline dissolves into a collective primal rage. They descend upon the bull, with a reckless disregard for safety, closing the distance to point-blank range. They are no longer poking from afar. They are stabbing, hacking, and thrusting with a fury born of grief. One hunter manages to sever the major tendons in the bull's rear leg, hamstringing the giant. The bull trumpets one last agonizing cry, a sound of defeat that echoes off the valley walls, and his rear leg collapses. The mountain falls. The impact shakes the ground, knocking the hunters to their knees as 6 tons of life force crash into the frozen earth. The bull attempts to rise, but his strength is gone, drained by the blood pouring from a dozen wounds and the failure of his overheated heart. His breathing slows, becoming a deep, rattling wheeze that blows bloody froth onto the snow. The hunters surround him, chests heaving, steam rising from their sweating bodies, their faces masked in a mixture of ash and the beast's blood. They do not cheer. They stand in a solemn circle, watching the light fade from the small, intelligent eye of the Titan. The struggle is over. The transition of energy is complete. The life that was in the mammoth now belongs to the tribe. His death is their life, his flesh their future. The silence that follows the battle is heavier than the noise that preceded it. The wind returns, whistling through the ravine, carrying the metallic scent of the slaughter down the valley. The snow in the creek bed is no longer white. It is a churned crimson slush, a graphic testament to the violence of the Pleistocene. The body of the fallen leader lies only a few yards from the head of the mammoth, 2 casualties of the same war resting in the same freezing mud. The snow begins to fall again, gently covering the red carnage, initiating the process of burial. The cold, indifferent, and eternal moves in to claim the scene, preserving the victor and the vanquished alike in its icy embrace. The hunters move to their fallen kin first. There is no time for elaborate burial rituals. The ground is too frozen to dig, and the predators will soon be attracted by the scent of blood. They cover him with heavy stones from the creek bed, building a cairn that will protect his bones from the wolves. They place his broken spear by his side, a final mark of his station. This cairn will eventually be swallowed by the sediment, the stones shifting over millennia to encase the skeleton, protecting it until the day it is uncovered by wind or pickaxe. He remains there, a sentinel at the site of his greatest triumph, his DNA waiting to be read by the future. Then they turn to the mammoth. The sun is dipping below the horizon, casting the valley in a deep bruised twilight. The temperature is plummeting rapidly, and they must work fast before the carcass freezes into a solid block of ice. The stone knives are brought out, the sharp flakes of flint gleaming in the failing light. They begin the butchery, slicing through the thick hide to reach the steaming meat beneath. The heat from the opened carcass is a welcome relief, warming their frozen hands. They eat raw, hot slivers of liver and heart right there in the bloody snow, the nutrient-dense organs instantly revitalizing their exhausted bodies. This is the primal communion, the intake of the wild spirit. As night falls, the rest of the tribe arrives, summoned by the runners. The women and children descend into the ravine, their eyes wide with awe at the size of the kill. The fire is brought down and rekindled near the carcass, creating a sanctuary of light and warmth in the center of the killing ground. The fear of the last few days evaporates, replaced by the euphoric relief of survival. They have food, they have materials, they have won. The immense shadow of the dead mammoth acts as a windbreak, sheltering the tiny humans who have conquered it. The scene is a tableau of triumph, the small figures feasting in the shadow of the giant, the firelight dancing on the ivory tusks that once threatened to kill them. But the documentary lens pulls back, widening the view to encompass the entire valley. We see the small flicker of the fire against the vast dark expanse of the steppe. We see the snow accumulating on the stone cairn of the dead hunter. We see the scavenger eyes glowing in the darkness beyond the ring of light, waiting for their turn. This is the brutal, beautiful cycle of the Ice Age. The fossil record has been updated today. A trade has been made, a life for a herd, a leader for a winter. The red snow will be covered by white by morning, but the bones will remain, locking this story into the earth, waiting for millions of years to whisper the truth of how hard it was to simply stay alive. The carcass of the mammoth bull now lies in the ravine like a fallen fortress, a massive geological feature of flesh and bone that has reshaped the immediate landscape. The blizzard that threatened earlier has receded into a high-altitude haze, leaving the valley floor exposed to the biting, crystalline clarity of the polar night. The temperature hovers at 40 degrees below freezing, a lethal cold that would turn a motionless human into a statue by morning. But here in the circle of the kill there is heat. The immense body mass of the dead titan retains its warmth, radiating a faint, ghostly steam that rises into the starlight, creating a micro-environment of survival. The tribe has moved inside the windbreak formed by the beast's flank, transforming the site of death into a temporary home, a sanctuary built from the very creature that tried to kill them. The work of the night is not celebration but industrial dismantling, a frantic race against the creeping rigors of mortis and the freezing of the meat. The stone tools, napped from black flint, carried from the southern mountains, are brought to bear with surgical precision. The skinners, the most experienced women of the tribe, work in a rhythmic trance, their blades separating the thick, shaggy hide from the subcutaneous fat. They peel back the heavy coat in great sheets, heavy as wet rugs, which are immediately dragged near the fire to thaw and scrape. This is not just refuse. It is the raw material for the next generation of tents, the insulation that will swaddle the newborns, the barrier between the fragile human skin and the killing wind. Beneath the skin lies the prize that drove them across the ice, the fat. It is a thick, white layer of energy, the accumulated solar power of the summer steppe, stored in biological form. The tribe consumes it greedily, their faces smeared with the grease, their bodies craving the dense caloric load required to fuel their shivering muscles. In this environment, lean meat is not enough. It is the fat that prevents starvation, that keeps the internal furnace burning through the long dark. They cut it into blocks, stacking it like bricks to freeze for the journey ahead. The smell of raw fat and fresh blood saturates the air, a heavy metallic perfume that is the scent of life itself in the Pleistocene, signaling to every nose in the valley that a great transfer of energy has occurred. Then begins the harvest of the bones, a process that will leave a distinct signature in the archaeological record for millions of years. The massive femurs and humeri are stripped of muscle and laid out on flat stones, treated not as waste but as vaults locked tight. Using heavy river cobbles as hammerstones, the strongest males strike the bones with calculated force, aiming for the structural weak points. The sound of cracking bone echoes through the ravine like gunshots, crack, 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 a percussive rhythm of the feast. The bones shatter spirally, revealing the pink gelatinous marrow inside. This is the superfood of the epoch, a concentrate of fat and nutrients that drives the rapid expansion of the hominid brain, fueling the very intelligence that allowed them to fell the giant. The children, wrapped in layers of older furs, sit close to the fire, using small slivers of bone to scoop the marrow from the splintered fragments. They are silent, their eyes wide and reflecting the flames, absorbing the gravity of the moment. This feast is a critical developmental milestone. The influx of high-quality protein and fat triggers a growth spurt, strengthening their skeletal structures and fortifying their immune systems against the harsh winter. They are eating the strength of the mammoth, metabolizing its power to build the future of their species. Around them, the adults work with a grim satisfaction, their bellies full for the first time in weeks, the gnawing anxiety of starvation temporarily replaced by the heavy narcotic comfort of satiety. But the scent of the kill is a broadcast signal that cannot be contained, drifting downwind for miles, penetrating the sensory organs of every predator on the steppe. The first to answer the call are the small scavengers, the Arctic foxes and wolverines ghosting through the scrub, their eyes catching the firelight like floating embers. The tribe ignores them. These are minor pests waiting for the scraps. However, the true danger arrives an hour past midnight. A low, rhythmic chittering sound rises from the darkness beyond the creek bed, followed by the heavy crunch of paws on snow. The air pressure seems to drop the atmosphere, charging with a new, malignant tension. The cave hyenas have arrived. These are not the scavengers of the modern African savanna, but they're monstrous cousins of the Ice Age beasts, the size of lions, with crushing jaws capable of pulverizing bone, and a pack intelligence that rivals the humans. They emerge from the shadows in a phalanx, shoulders hunched, heads low, their heavy coats matted with ice. There are 20 of them, a clan that rivals the human tribe in number and surpasses them in night vision and brute strength. They do not fear the humans. To them, the bipeds are merely another competitor, weak and slow, standing between them and the mountain of meat. Their eyes glow green in the firelight, blinking with a terrifying unified hunger as they encircle the camp, testing the perimeter. The human leader, the new alpha, who stepped up when the former fell, barks a sharp command. The butchery stops instantly. The tribe shifts from industry to defense, a transformation as fluid as water turning to ice. The women and children retreat to the space between the mammoth's legs, using the massive limbs as pillars of a fortress. The hunters snatch up their spears and brands from the fire, forming a semicircle facing the darkness. The fire is built higher, fed with chunks of mammoth fat, sending a roaring column of flame and black smoke into the sky. This is the only barrier that matters, the wall of light that separates the tool users from the beasts of the night. The hyenas test the line with probing attacks, lunging in to snap at a leg or a flank, trying to draw a human out into the dark. A massive female hyena, the matriarch of the pack, charges a young spearman on the left flank. He thrusts his weapon, but she dodges with unnatural speed, her jaws clamping onto the wood of the spear shaft, shattering it in a spray of splinters. She lunges for his throat, but a burning brand thrown by another hunter strikes her in the flank, singing her fur. She yelps a high-pitched human-like sound that raises the hair on the necks of the tribe and retreats into the shadows. The siege has begun. It is a battle of nerves, a standoff between the masters of fire and the masters of the dark. For hours, the ravine is a chaotic theater of shadows and screams. The hyenas coordinate their assaults, attacking from multiple angles simultaneously, trying to stretch the human defense until it snaps. The humans fight back with a desperate ingenuity. They do not just use their spears, they use the mammoth itself. A hunter wields a fractured rib bone like a club, the heavy, dense bone crushing the skull of a hyena that gets too close. Another uses a sharp flake of flint to slash at the sensitive noses of the attackers. They scream and shout, adding their voices to the roar of the fire, amplifying their size and presence. The primitive mind understands that silence is prey, noise is power. The climax of the night comes when the fire begins to dim, the fuel reserves running low. The hyenas sense the weakness, their chittering rising to a fever pitch. The pack masses for a final overwhelming rush, sensing the protective light fading. The new leader makes a drastic decision. He orders the hunters to throw the remaining processed fat, the precious winter store, directly into the embers. It is a sacrifice of future survival for present life. The fat hits the coals and explodes. A massive, blinding fireball erupts, a geyser of orange flame that shoots 30 feet into the air, illuminating the entire valley with the brightness of noon. The heat is intense, searing the eyebrows of the defenders and sending a shockwave of thermal energy rolling outward. The sudden explosion of light and heat breaks the nerve of the pack. The hyenas, blinded and terrified by this display of magic, scatter in panic, yelping and crashing through the brush to escape the wrath of the fire god. The matriarch lingers for a moment, her green eyes narrowing at the humans, acknowledging a power she cannot comprehend, before turning and vanishing into the night. The tribe stands panting in the afterglow, their weapons lowered, their chests heaving. They have held the line. They have defended their prize. The cost was high, some of the meat is gone, burned as fuel, but they are alive. The fortress of bone held, the fire held. As the adrenaline fades, a profound exhaustion settles over the camp. The adrenaline crash leaves them shaking, their muscles cramping from the cold and the fight. They collapse where they stand, huddled together in a pile of furs and bodies against the warm flank of the mammoth. The children sleep with their bellies full of marrow, their faces stained with grease and soot. The sentries rotate, eyes heavy but vigilant, watching the perimeter. The sounds of the night return, the wind, the distant howl of a wolf, but the immediate threat has passed. The ravine, once a place of slaughter, is now a silent dormitory housing the victors of the night. Dawn breaks slowly, a grey bruising light that creeps over the valley walls, revealing the aftermath. The snow around the camp is trampled into a dark slurry of mud, blood and ash. The carcasses of 2 hyenas lie near the fire perimeter, their bodies stiff and frosted trophies of the defense. The mammoth is diminished, stripped of its prime cuts, its ribs exposing the cavity within like the rafters of a ruined house. But there is still enough meat to dry enough bone to carry enough hide to clothe them all. The tribe begins to stir, stiff and sore but alive. They look at each other with a new recognition. They are the survivors of the long night, the keepers of the fire. The camera lingers on a single detail, a human handprint pressed into the cooling fat on the mammoth's flank next to the deep gouges of hyena claws. It is a temporary signature, soon to be erased by the scavengers and the weather, but for this moment it signifies possession. This beast, this place, this moment belongs to them. They have turned a titan of the earth into a resource, converting the raw violence of the natural world into culture, tools and life. The feast of marrow is over. The work of the future begins. They must now prepare to leave this place, carrying the weight of their victory into the uncertainty of the ice. The dawn that rises over the ravine is pale and indistinct, a ghost of light filtering through the high-altitude ice haze. It illuminates a scene of stark, brutal transformation. The valley floor, once a pristine carpet of white snow and golden grass, is now a scarred battlefield of trampled mud ash and red-stained slush. The great fortress of the mammoth carcass has been dismantled, reduced to a skeletal architecture of white ribs and a crushed skull rising from the earth like the ruins of a fallen temple. The tribe, the architects of this destruction, moves with a synchronized heavy purpose, packing the spoils of their victory. They are no longer the desperate, starving refugees who stumbled down from the ice shelf days ago. They are burdened now, weighed down by the heavy, wet pelts of the Titan and the sacks of dried meat that will sustain them through the deep winter. The departure is devoid of sentiment or ceremony, driven by the ruthless logic of the steppe, which dictates that to linger is to die. The scavengers are already circling closer, emboldened by the daylight, great flocks of ravens descending like black rain, and the bolder foxes darting in to steal scraps of cartilage. The humans secure their bindings, checking the tension of the sinew straps that hold the precious mammoth bones, femurs to be turned into tent poles, ribs to be carved into needles, ivory to be shaped into idols. Every member of the clan carries a piece of the beast. They have absorbed its physical mass into their own culture, turning the biological giant into a mobile resource that will travel with them across the continent. The fire is extinguished, the last embers hissing as they are buried under a handful of snow, signaling the end of their residency in this valley. Behind them, the ravine begins its slow geological process of reclaiming the site, a mechanism that will eventually turn this moment of violence into a permanent record. The body of the fallen leader, buried beneath the pile of river stones, has already begun to freeze solid, his temperature dropping to match the surrounding permafrost. He is no longer a man. He is a deposit of organic material encased in a protective layer of rock and ice. The microbes that would normally hasten decomposition are suspended by the cold, halting the decay of his soft tissues and preserving the integrity of his skeleton. He lies in a fetal position, his hand still curled as if gripping a spear, waiting for the earth to wrap him in its dark, preserving embrace. A few yards away, the remains of the mammoth undergo a different transformation, one that will create the context for the human fossil. The scavengers will strip the remaining meat within days, leaving the bones exposed to the elements, but the unique geography of the ravine works in favor of preservation. The spring melt, when it comes, will wash a slurry of silt and clay down the creek bed, covering the bones in a thick, anaerobic layer of mud. This sediment will protect the calcium structures from the sun and wind, sealing them away from the destructive forces of the surface. Over millennia, the groundwater rich in minerals from the limestone cliffs will seep into the microscopic pores of the bone, replacing the organic collagen with silica and calcite. The bone will become stone, a lithic copy of the biological original, harder than the rock that surrounds it. Deep within the ribcage of the mammoth, a single, jagged fragment of flint remains embedded in the bone, the tip of the spear that shattered during the initial assault. This is the crucial artifacts, the smoking gun of the Pleistocene crime scene. It is a detail that transcends biology and enters the realm of narrative. It is the physical proof of interaction between the species. When the silt covers this rib, it locks the stone point in place, fusing the tool of the hunter with the body of the prey. In the deep future, this fusion will tell the story of the hunt more clearly than any words could. It speaks of the technology, the ballistics, and the sheer force required to penetrate the hide, a silent testament to the ingenuity and violence of the naked ape. As the tribe climbs the slope, moving away from the creek bed, they pause briefly at the ridgeline to look back, not at the grave, but at the horizon. They are different creatures now than the ones who arrived. Their bellies are full, their tools are sharper, and their minds are expanded by the influx of high-energy fats. The children, swaddled in the fresh, heavy fur of the mammoth, look out at the world with eyes that are clear and alert. They have witnessed the power of cooperation, the dominance of fire, and the vulnerability of the gods. This knowledge is etched into their neural pathways just as surely as the flint is etched into the bone. They turn their backs on the valley and step out onto the open tundra, a small, dark line of conquerors moving into the teeth of the wind. The wind immediately rushes in to fill the void left by their bodies, blowing snow over the trampled mud, softening the jagged edges of the disturbance. Within hours, the footprints of the humans are erased, the evidence of their presence wiped from the surface. The silence returns heavy and absolute, claiming the valley once more. The ravens finish their feast and disperse their croaks, fading into the vastness of the air. The landscape looks almost exactly as it did before the humans arrived, save for the cairn of stones and the white scatter of ribs. Nature is efficient at cleaning up the mess of life, hiding the trauma under a fresh coat of white, resetting the stage for the next act of the drama. Then begins the long, dark wait of the deep time, a span of years that defies human comprehension. The seasons cycle with a hypnotic, terrifying regularity, winter a brief thaw, winter again, each cycle adding a millimeter of sediment to the valley floor. The ice sheet to the north pulses, advancing and retreating, grinding mountains into dust and spreading it across the plains. The weight of the accumulating earth presses down on the bones of the hunter and the mammoth, compacting the soil into shale, squeezing the water out, fossilizing the moment of their death. The world above changes. The steppe dries out, the forests return, the glaciers melt, and new species walk the surface, unaware of the drama locked in the rock beneath their feet. The skeleton of the hunter, encased in his stone tomb, becomes a time capsule of his era, his bones recording the biography of his struggle. The ridges on his tibia tell of the miles he walked. The density of his arm bones speaks of the spears he threw. The enamel of his teeth holds the chemical signature of the water he drank and the meat he ate. He is no longer an individual named by his kin. He is a representative of his entire species, a biological blueprint of the Homo erectus survival strategy. He waits in the dark, holding his secrets, preserving the truth of his existence against the erasure of time. He is a message in a bottle, cast into the ocean of the earth, waiting for a distant shore. The mammoth, too, waits its massive bones, preserving the environmental data of the Pleistocene. The chemical composition of its tusks records the temperature of the years it lived, the vegetation it ate, and the health of the herd. The shattered rib with the flint point tells of the predation pressure, the arms race between the grazer and the hunter. Together, the man and the beast form a single context, a locked tableau of the food web that sustained the early world. They are bound together in death, as they were in that final moment of life, two distinct evolutionary paths that collided in a snowy ravine and were frozen in that collision forever. The narrative of the earth is not written in ink, but in these rare, miraculous survivals of structure. For every one that is preserved, millions rot and vanish, their atoms scattered into the wind, their stories lost to the void. The fact that this specific hunter, this specific mammoth, and this specific spear tip survived the grinder of geology is a statistical miracle. It is a defiance of entropy, a refusal to be forgotten. The fossil is not just a rock. It is a victory over oblivion, a tangible link to a morning millions of years ago, when the snow turned red and the air smelled of blood and fire. It allows the future to touch the past, to feel the sharpness of the flint and the weight of the bone. As the camera pulls back, rising high above the valley, the landscape is swallowed by the accelerating passage of time. The creek bed fills with sediment, the ridges are worn down by rain, and the vegetation shifts from tundra grass to boreal forest and back again. The cairn is buried, lost under layers of soil hidden from the sun. The world moves on, forgetting the names of the tribes and the roars of the beasts. Civilizations will rise and fall, languages will be born and die, but the bones remain silent and patient in the dark. They are the bedrock of truth, the immutable evidence that we were here, that we struggled, and that we survived the ice. The screen fills with the blinding white of a new glacier, a sheet of ice, a mile thick that scrapes the land clean, sealing the fossil layer under immense pressure. The story is now locked, the book is closed, waiting for the hands that will one day pry it open. The wind howls over the ice, the same wind that bit the faces of the tribe, the only constant in a world of change. It whispers the old song of the North, a song of cold and hunger, and the burning will to live. The white silence is the only truth, and deep beneath it the record waits. The story is not over. It is simply sleeping in the stone.